Such a blessing, our worship team this morning. A preface before I get in, I'm going to say this so that it doesn't make it into the podcast recording. I hope so. My son might get me back for times where I mention him on stage. I'm wearing a hat today, not to rebel against whatever kind of code and rules that we have regarding attire. I just got a big pimple on my forehead, and I figured you're less distracted by me supporting the Mavs even in the off season and than the red light that I got going on my forehead. I keep looking at my running hat that I run in like most of the time, and I keep thinking I need to wash it. It's nasty. And you think you grow out of teenage boy stuff, and you don't. And anyway, and so I'm like, okay, now I need to wash this hat. I'm gonna wash the hat. So anyway. But we're going to jump in to the message today. We are in our series, This Is What We Do. Again, really born out of a statement a church member said because she had captured the heart of the Life Church in serving when a mom had showed up to our young adults that we host at our house, led by Pastor Jack, and she was leading, and all of a sudden there was an opportunity to tag team and take care of the young one, and it was like, what are you doing? Because someone else had it covered, and she said, this is what we do. She was serving in a way to create opportunity, and so we're really talking about the values. I want to start in Proverbs chapter 11, verses 24 through 28. Proverbs chapter 11, as we get into what our topic today is going to be. And Proverbs 11 says, give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. People curse those who hoard their grain, but they bless the one who sells in time of need. If you search for good, you will find favor. I love that phrase. If you search for good, you will find favor. But if you search for evil, it will find you. I love the difference, the dichotomy between these two concepts. Trust in your money and down you go, but the godly flourish like leaves in spring. We are talking about in this series, This Is What We Do. We are talking about the value of generosity. But in the midst of this scripture that we often apply to money, the one verse that I love in here that to show us greater than just finances is verse 25. It says, the generous will prosper, and it follows in that same verse, those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. It's a picture that generosity is not about the tangible things. We often will define generosity, or when we talk about generosity, we might by default think money and tangibility of what we can hold on to and giving in that kind of way. But even the idea of generosity is beyond the tangible to what we cannot see. Generosity even coming and being attached to the idea of kindness. Even if you look it up in the dictionary, it's attached to the concept of kindness, and kindness not being limited to the things we can hold, because let's be real, kindness is more about the character of who you are than what you hold in your hands. Because even what we do with what we hold in our possessions is really just a faithfulness of who we are. And it's not about the thing itself. Generosity is not limited to the tangible. And so we must move beyond this. And this scripture this week came to me, and I love even this picture in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18 says, so we don't look at the troubles we can see now, because let's be real, we talk about generosity and then we think about money and then we think about troubles. like sometimes, I don't know about you, but man, and maybe it's like finances aren't even the issue right now, but you still live in that place sometimes where it's like, because you remember when you were broke. You remember when you were getting those calls, and you remember those situations, and like sometimes we still live even in the fear of when we did not have, even though we do have now. And so that's still a struggle sometimes. But even though, so we don't look at the troubles we can see now, rather we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. The things we cannot see will last forever. That's why I love the picture of generosity being beyond the tangible and being about the very thing about what we cannot see, the hope of what we place in that we cannot see, that we cannot measure, that we cannot gauge, that we cannot write down on a piece of paper or see it on a spreadsheet. The hope of what we cannot see will last forever. The acts of generosity that go beyond this moment in these times that will last forever. I love this picture. I didn't send y'all this quote by C.S. Lewis, but he's got a quote about, I can only imagine when I get to heaven that God's not going to be like, oh, you were too generous with your money. like if anything, C.S. Lewis talks about like in the afterlife of being like, I didn't give enough. I didn't obey enough. I wasn't generous enough. There is no way God's going to get there like, oh, no. You were too loving. You were too giving. You were too merciful. You forgave too much. Like in no world can I imagine this creation of God that we would get to a place and there'd be like too much of a good thing. The things we cannot see isn't applying though. And I need to take a step back because we live in a culture, by the way, of all the things we cannot see, and I don't like it. I don't like digital streaming of music. I won't even name a platform. I got more than one of those apps on my phone. I can tell you, I know I'm going to sound like old man curmudgeon right now, and that's okay. This will be my old man complaining time for a moment because like I still like my DVDs. I still like someone we were talking this morning, and wasn't even part of it, and they're talking about how they're going back and like changing the DVD, or the videos, okay, we made that movie. And maybe some of it's for the good, don't get me wrong. But some of it's like, oh, just because we can, like we're going to digitally CGI go back and fix that Star Wars movie, and it wasn't even necessary. We're just going to make a change. And it's like, no. But if I got the DVD, I got the original copy. You can't change anything on that. Like you can't change my cover art, but we live in this age of streaming, and like nobody owns anything anymore. That's one of the reasons I talked a while back about I almost brought some CDs and even some vinyl records up here, and so I know we've kind of got a mixed audience. Some of you might be thinking, maybe one of those mediums speaks to you more than the other, and I was going to have both, and I didn't bring them, but I love my CDs. And there's a reason I talk about this in the midst of this kind of like this age of not owning anything. All our money is digital, and I'm not even talking cryptocurrency, even the real money, right? Like is even like, do I even see it anymore? Do I carry cash anymore? And like this weird world, and then, of course, everything crashes the other day, and like Dick's Sporting Goods can't even open their store because they can't sell stuff because they ran the updates. Anyway, but my title today is going to come from a CD. My title today, even though talking about generosity, my title today is Give It Away. And that comes from a particular CD in the 90s, a CD that was one of those CDs. And I'm sorry for some of y'all that maybe this won't make full sense to some of y'all. Maybe you're from another nation. This comes from a band called Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like Pastor Shavank has probably never listened to Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's probably better for it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not here to promote Red Hot Chili Peppers, but if Pastor Shavank listened to any band just based on their name, it would probably be Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like it's just he did tone down his hot sauce for the men's cookout though Wednesday night. Like he did tone it down for some of us, but the Red Hot Chili. See, this was a CD that it wasn't even my first CD. We won't get into all that list back in the 90s. I'm one of those 90s kids, but my mom. I remember she bought this CD, and so when they were away at work, I was man. I get home from school, and I am putting in that album, and Give It Away would come on, and man, I'd just be jamming to Give It Away. I was almost gonna have my hair down like Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer. Some of y'all know Under the Bridge when he's running down the street and his hair's like flowing, and like dreams, goals, and like I love this song and this concept, but also one of the reasons that this song speaks to me so much is because of how much we misunderstand it. You see, I remember even the struggle, even in my limited Christianity, even at that time and it's not even just this song, but how often, especially songs that are secular in nature or come from a secular place, and we misunderstand and we think, like we thought this song was all sexualized and about something completely different. And the whole song, Give It Away, is literally that. It's giving stuff away. It's generosity is the premise of the song. We'll get into a couple of the lyrics here in a bit. How often, though, do we misunderstand books and movies and things, and we miss the point that's actually being portrayed? And I get it, don't get me wrong. Like, if you watch the music videos, MTV era, you watch the music videos, which oftentimes had nothing to do with the song. It's just some sort of artistic creation. And if you watch the music video to that song, again, I'm not promoting it, but if you know, you know. And if you watch the music video to that song, like, you would not think that this has anything to do with generosity of life. But Anthony Kiedis, the story goes that this song was written out of someone being generous to him in a time that they shouldn't have been or didn't have to be. That someone had given something to him that they had held dearly. And in the midst of this, he got this revelation of giving things away and being owned. I even love, he even talks about in the song about even a Kaiser holding it all to ourselves like a Kaiser. And let's jump into a couple of the lyrics. We'll look at some of the lyrics here. I'm not singing it, and we're not playing it, and I'm going to try not to sing it. But I love it if we have the lyrics here. The first group is some of the lyrics. I love it. Greedy little people in a sea of distress, keep your more to receive your less. Unimpressed by material excess, love is free, love me. Now, I actually didn't mean for them to put that word in there. I was going to actually leave that word out, but anyway, it made it in there, the cut. I won't say it, though. I'm wearing a hat. I'm already offending some of y'all, maybe. I won't say the word too. But love is free, love me, say heaven yes. I know that ruins the rhyme. But I love this picture here for a moment. Even in the midst of, go back, guys. Even in the midst of the greed, he's linking greed to distress and keep your more, but then receive less. The picture that he gives us here, and you can go ahead and go to the next one now. Get the bad word off, the 4-letter word. There's a river born to be a giver. Such a beautiful picture. Keep you warm, won't let you shiver. His heart is never gonna wither. Come on, everybody. Time to deliver. And then he goes, give it away, give it away, give it away now. And some of y'all know what that part is, and you can go to the rest of it, and you hear it in that tone, and that's the catchy part that really sold us on the song. But we so often, we misunderstand, and so often that's what I believe sometimes we even have this concept of generosity is we misunderstand even generosity. We have our preconceived notion and ideas of what it's like to be generous, or you come into this space and you think generosity is just about finances and money, and you hear the word and it triggers an emotional response rather than a realization of what God's trying to speak to you. And we so often we so often misunderstand. I like how Pastor Rich Velotis, he said, and let's be real, I think even in reading the song itself, we hear a mine-itis. I liked how he called that mine-itis. Everything's mine. I licked it first, so it's mine. Another conversation this morning. Anyway, I love when I have all these conversations, and sometimes I don't even realize how they're just fitting in. And so show up early and have conversations. We'll have coffee together, and I love it. And so anyway, but so often we kind of misunderstand it. And I always loved the song, but of course, when I was 16, I loved it for the wrong reasons, or I loved it just for the selfish reasons. I loved it for the mine-itis. It's just a song that made me want to move and maybe want to dance and maybe want to whatever it was. I'm not confessing to dancing in the house when no one else is home and blasting my stepdad's stereo anyway, but and doing those things. And maybe you've got a song like that, the realization. Maybe you've got a moment where you had misjudged something, and then later, all of a sudden in maturity or in revelation or in learning or education, all of a sudden you realize that there was something more in that situation than you realized. Even a moment of generosity, of opportunity, and you realize. But the thing I also struggled with in the midst of the same story is, you see, my mom didn't buy that CD for that song. If anything, my mom absolutely did not buy that CD. Like, she probably didn't want that song, because the funny thing is the song that I mentioned in the midst of this album, by the way, I love this concept. One of the pastors I love to listen to preach, he does a summer series, is Founding God in the Music, and he actually literally every Sunday picks a different song and just preaches from that song. So I love the concept of what we're doing. If you hate this, please bear with me and just be generous with me. And I love, there's a church, by the way, in Germany just recently this year, and this church old building, and they did a Swift day. I don't remember what they called it, a Swift day, Taylor Swift. They preached a whole long service of based on Taylor Swift. She'd come through for a concert, and they had like 1,200 people show up to hear this pastor preach Taylor Swift lyrics. It was like such a cool concept. I love it. So anyway, but my mom, see, she bought the album. This goes back to the day of CDs. One of the reasons, again, CDs are a trap. This is I know I can balk all I want about the digital age and the intangible of streaming stuff. But you remember back in those days, you hear a song on the radio. I don't know if we have a radio, favorite. You probably, I don't know. You have an antenna. You have to set a dial. It's way before your time. And you hear a song on the radio, and you're like, oh, I want that album. And then you buy that album. And then the album absolutely does not live up to your expectations. You buy that album and you are complete. My mom bought that album for the song called Under the Bridge. The song that was so different in style, mellow, had this rhythm to it, and in such a way. And then she buys the album, and the rest of the album is the complete opposite of this rock, funk, whatever. I remember I watched the show The Good Place, interesting show, and they were like making fun of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. By the way, I was so offended. I'm like, why are you making fun of like one of the bands that I still love today? And anyway, so and she buys this album, and expectations are absolutely not met. But this is even the issue of generosity, because so often we're wrestling with this thought: is my generosity going to be worth it? Is my generosity going to pay off? If I am generous in this situation, is it going to be worth it? I mean, let's be real. Even sponsoring another child in another nation through whatever organization that we choose to partner with, is it really going to be worth it? And how much of my money is even going to make it to the child? I remember talking to somebody one time, and like, anyway, this person, I'm wrestling with trying not to say too much, but this person was, a friend was going to donate to one of those organizations and sponsor a child, and he was like comparing these two organizations and overhead and how much money he made it and this and that. And don't get me wrong, there's due diligence sometimes in us being aware of what we give our money to, whether it's even this church or the local church, or whether it's a parachurch organization and working with pays like we do, or missions organization. Abraham, I'll talk about it probably soon. Abraham Matthew, he's gone again on the road, and he got back from India and was showing like how many students that he has for the next year. That just is amazing with the Bible Leadership School there in India, and there's nothing wrong with making sure of our due diligence and doing those things, but let's not let it rob generosity. Come to find out, that person that was even being in that situation, he wasn't quite what we thought anyway. And when you find that there's even a generosity issue, sometimes someone can be generous with money, but not anything else. Sometimes we can understand the principle of the tithe and that I should give 10%, but then I'd lack generosity in any other aspect of my life. Generosity that's even tied to kindness, but yet I'm not kind in any kind of way, but yet I think I'm generous just because I simply give money, but I don't give my time. I don't give my kindness. I don't listen more than I speak. I'm not generous in so many other ways of being patient with somebody. And we completely detach it even from the fruits of the Spirit and say, oh, but as long as I do this and check the box, then I'm generous. I just finished a book this week. Says think this, not that. And in his book, Dr. Josh Axe was even talking about how he had, as a Christian and a doctor, he had a principle of generosity and tithing and giving, offering and supporting nonprofits and things like that. And he had multiple mentors. He was the mentee, multiple mentors. By the way, like 3/4 of Americans believe that we should have a mentor in our life to help us into the next phase of life, but very few of us actually do have a mentor. It's just a very interesting thing there. But one of his mentors, he realized was was all of a sudden was like talking about all these leadership qualities and leading them in this, but was very, very strong against giving and didn't do any giving. And then he saw that, in the midst of his relationships, all he did was take and never give as well, to the point of ending marriage and ending other relationships. And then, of course, let's be mindful that maybe this person shouldn't be a mentor. The idea of generosity is even moving beyond just those things. It's moving beyond even just the legalistic aspect or the rules or check boxes. But we should be aware, and so often, if I give this $5 to the homeless, will it be worth it? If I'm giving if I even take this step of faith and I begin to tithe, will I even see a change in my life? And so often we want to qualify the quantity. We want to qualify, and tipping culture, we can talk about. Tipping culture has gotten out of hand, and we can, all the stories and all this and that. But I tell you one thing, I don't mind tipping, but can I tell you when I really hate tipping? Tipping before the service. I show up, I'm going to tip before I get my food. I'm like, that's a dangerous game. I'm like that's some faith step there. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying. But that's sometimes our concept of generosity is even going into the situations. And like sometimes we just feel like, wait a second. You're like, is that why we take up the offering at the end of service? Like if the preaching's good, you tip well. No, I'm just kidding. These struggles, though, is the generosity of what I have to give, is me being patient with other drivers on the road. Is that really going to make a difference? Is that person cut me off? They're going to cut off the next person too, even though I failed to realize sometimes that it's not even about them. It's really just about me. And even the idea of generosity in my driving or treating people or walking and shopping or with my family and my sisters. And I've got 5 sisters, so I'm usually going to be disliking one of them at some point, at some time. And the one that's not listening to this podcast will be the one, by the way. And so, and will it even be worth it to give generously in this situation, to give of myself? And so often we want that. We want that even in the homeless. I love how C.S. Lewis, we do have this quote. I love this idea. Another thing he says that annoys me is when people say, why did you give that man money? He'll probably go and drink it. And my reply is, but if I had kept it, I should have probably drunk it myself. like even in situations like that, and homeless is one of the easy examples that we can give from the platform and bring our attention to, because we see them on corners, and it's the ones that we don't see the idea of generosity in the mirror or at work, and it's an easy situation that we can see this, but it's also one of the easy ones that can help us move in a way of understanding and operating and doing this, and even practicing the idea of generosity. And maybe sometimes it's not even giving literal money to the person, or like we've done in the past of having prepared meals or food or things like that to be able to give to somebody. But this is why I believe it's Acts chapter 3 that even we see Peter and John are in this situation, and it even says that the man expected money, the man that was begging. He says, silver and gold do I have not any, but what I do have, in the name of Jesus, to get up and walk. I love even in this picture of, but are we even willing in whatever our situation is to use this as even a premise beyond finances and beyond money to say, look, whatever it is in this situation, what I do have. Because I've got faith where maybe you don't have it. I've got love where maybe you're feeling empty. I've got grace and peace in a situation where you feel nothing but chaos. And what I have in this situation that God has been so generous to me in my life, I'm going to be generous to you in your life. And so what I have, you may not have time, but I have time in this situation. Whatever it might be that you have to take inventory, to say, look, in my situation, this is what I can be generous with. That the idea of generosity is move beyond the tangible, move beyond just those things. And not through fear, not manipulation. It doesn't say God loves a fearful giver. God loves a manipulated, generous person, that we are in those places. Someone was talking about wanting to give to something and this and that. And really, I was like, if you want to give and you pray and you feel led to give to that, great. Just don't give out of manipulation or just feeling obligated in a natural or emotional sense, just being moved. It's not the 1 a.m. middle of the night kind of commercial with the kid in another country kind of trying to tug our heartstrings and the dog. Like, we're not doing that in this life, but we are moved by the power of God to love and care for those around us, to say, yes, I'm going to be generous, and to maybe see in the ways in our life where we've held tight. Maybe money is not the issue again, like I've said, but maybe it is grace. Maybe it's forgiveness. The very things that God has poured out in our lives, and we hold tight and we hold firm and say, no. Even to the point that oftentimes with people, like the song, we misunderstand even its intent and what its purpose is. Oh, because I just hear what I hear. What if we can even be generous? In practicing this generosity, I was in a Christian bookstore some time back, and I was wearing a concert T-shirt. For Adele, bucket list item, took my wife to the Adele concert, and I love my Adele T-shirt. I wasn't there for me, but I was there because I love my wife and I enjoyed it and all that. And I love wearing my T-shirt. And I remember at checkout, and all of a sudden, the woman recognized the T-shirt, and she was like, "Oh, Adele!" And she gave a praise kind of statement of acknowledging Adele in this moment, and then it quickly transformed and turned into criticism and putting Adele down in this moment. And I thought in this moment, and I don't mean this to be critical of her, just the life that we sometimes live, and we fail to even recognize the generosity, the lack of generosity in even our words and how we speak about certain topics. We're going into a political season, if we've ever left the political season. We're going into a political season that doesn't need more of whatever it's been. It needs more generosity. It needs more grace and patience to just be with people in the midst of differences. I love the idea of the politics isn't what actually divides us. Politics is just what illuminates who we truly are and allows what we really are to be exposed. So if the division comes from the politics, the division comes because of the people themselves. And if we can learn to be generous even in who we are in the midst of that, we might, through generosity, be able to transform our culture, transform our families, transform our church, our workplaces, transform whatever it might be. If we could be generous. And I love this picture. We're going to take communion soon. We've been doing it differently throughout this series with me preaching enough Sundays in a row. My preference, I love having communion at the end of service, at the end of the sermon and leading into that. And if you're new with us or guests, you are more than welcome to join us in communion. You do not have to be a member of the Life Church. We believe in open communion. But when we take communion, this is simply a declaration of our faith in Jesus and who he is. And Romans chapter 8, verse 32 gives us a picture of this. Since he did not, speaking of God, since he did not spare even his own son, but gave him up for us all, won't he also give us everything else? Such a picture of God's generosity that he gives us. That God in his generosity would not even withhold or maintain or contain even his own son. One of the most famous verses that even many outside the church even know, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He would not even spare his only son, but won't he give us everything? His generosity doesn't even end there. But a generous God to say, won't I give you everything else that you desire? And God was not generous so that we didn't have to be generous, but Jesus to die on the cross to say, but won't you join me? But I love this picture today, even more so because even in the midst of this, I mean, how often do we misunderstand or misjudge those around us? But God yet sees us. He sees our hearts, and even in the midst of we're singing the wrong song, or we're saying even maybe it's the wrong lyrics, maybe we're singing whatever song and we're doing it wrong, and God say, I still love you. I still care about you. But God, don't you know it may not even be worth it because I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to pray a prayer of salvation, but then at some point, I'm going to get back into that sin. I'm going to go back to that relationship. I'm going to go back to that thing. I'm going to struggle. I'm going to deal with the things that I think are the sin that keeps me from you in the midst of depression and anxiety. Don't you know that I'm going to be separated from your love? As far as the east is from the west, are you kidding me? Don't you know, God, it may not be worth it, but yet God would be a God who says, it doesn't even matter what song you're singing, what the lyrics that you're saying, I'm going to give my generosity to you. And even though you may even make mistakes and feel far from me, I'm still with you. And so sometimes I share the struggles that I sometimes have as a pastor, as a Christian, as a person following Jesus to the best of my ability. And sometimes these apply to me, and God says no. His grace is sufficient. His love is more powerful. There is no separation. There is in no way a possibility of being separated. James 1:16 says, so don't be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. The same God who saved you before you knew it is the same God who saved you when you knew it, and the same God who saved you after you forgot is the same God who saved you when you came back, is the same God who saves you today, is the same God who saved you yesterday, and the same God who saves you tomorrow. Because that's the generosity of God. He chose to give birth to us by giving us his true word, and we, out of all creation, became his prized possession.